Hey everybody, it is Professor Parish, and we are on Module 8 of English 123. So technically we're about at the midterm, which is crazy, right? So the good thing about this class is that we do not have a midterm exam. That is not something that we do since it's a creative writing class. There's not a midterm exam, and there's not really anything I could test you all over other than like, what is poetry? So we're not going to do anything like that. Instead, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to go over the module guides for week 8 and week 9. I'll go ahead and put module 9 up here to show you guys here in just a second. But for module 8, there's no reading assignments technically. We're really just going to talk about the paper guidelines as well as the outline and topic for this paper 3. So we're going back to fiction. We're going back to fiction and nonfiction, to the short story elements, which is great. Looking at what was due over this last week. If you've not turned in, I'm recording this on Sunday, so if you've not turned in paper 2 yet, make sure that you do that tonight. It is worth 100 points. And then this week, I'll be grading your papers and getting them back to you. So if you decide to revise, you will have that opportunity the next couple of weeks. So that's for this week's assignment. And so I want to go over paper 3 guidelines here, and I pulled them up here. So short story part 2. So the first paper did ask you to create, it asked you to create a story with the following elements of short story. So you have character, you have setting, your plot, your point of view, symbolic elements, a theme, and an overall style. And I will say, I have been thoroughly impressed with your paper number 1s. They were so good. I really, really enjoyed reading them. There were some amazing pieces of fiction and nonfiction in there. I loved them. So what you're being asked this second time around is that the short story should be the opposite of what you chose for paper 1. So that's where it's going to get a little challenging. So if you chose a nonfiction story for paper 1, paper 3 is going to ask you to choose a fiction story. And if you did a fiction story for paper 1, then you're going to do a nonfiction for this one. So we're doing the opposite, right? So I want to challenge you a little bit. Because I know a lot of people like writing fiction. Well, this is going to challenge you to kind of break out of your comfort zone and write about now. That being said, if you wrote nonfiction for paper 1, obviously your fiction story can be anything, any topic, any genre, whatever. But I will say, if you are someone that, when you hear nonfiction, I think a lot of people get a little nervous because they're like, oh, I don't want to write about myself. I don't want to write about my own experiences. You don't have to. For nonfiction, what I'm looking for is that it is about something based in reality. So it can be about yourself if you want. It doesn't have to be anything traumatic. I've had people write nonfiction stories about winning a game in a tournament or going on a trip with their grandparent or like the last trip they took with a family member or something like that, or a vacation. It doesn't have to be a heavy, deep subject matter. It can be light and funny and refreshing. It can be a nice, positive, fluffy story. Fiction, nonfiction doesn't have to be dark and brooding all the time, right? So you can write about yourself. That's one option if you do nonfiction. You can write about a family member or a friend. And again, consistent point of view. So just because it's nonfiction does not mean it has to be in first person. You can write it from a third person point of view, a second person point of view. That, as long as the story is based on a real person, place, or event, that's what I'm looking for in nonfiction. You could even write about something that doesn't involve people at all. I've seen some nonfiction that has been wrote about moments in history, wrote from a nonfiction perspective. So you could write about, a hurricane hitting Florida or something and write it from a tree's perspective, right? I mean, that's nonfiction technically. It's something based in reality, right? So you can do something like that, or you can write about a community. I had, back when we had the 2008 tornadoes that came through where we are at here in Southern Illinois, I had a lot of students write nonfiction stories about communities coming together, and they wrote it in the third person. So you can do something like that. But if you chose fiction for paper 1, you are going to have to do nonfiction for this paper. So it's just going to be, what will you write about? And if you chose nonfiction for paper 1, then you get to do fiction this time around. So that's good. It's going to be interesting seeing what you all come up with for your topics for this paper, but the paper itself must be 3 full pages, has to be 12-point font, double spaced, no bold, enlarged, or hard to read fonts. Dialogue is optional. You do not have to have dialogue in your story. It's optional if you want it. Margins are 1 inch, and it should have an introduction and conclusion. And then here is kind of the breakdown of how the points work. And so you have your intro and conclusion, you have standard American English grammar mechanics, your formatting, your elements of prose are utilized creatively. And by creatively, I mean they're utilized. Usually if you utilize them well, it's going to be creative anyway. That's a subjective term on that rubric. But yeah, so if you have questions, and I would say if you're torn between topics, just list both of them in your assignment I'm about to explain. And then if you have questions, feel free to email me them. Okay? So your actual assignment for this week is the topic and outline for paper 3. It's very much like what we've done with the outlines for the last 2 assignments. It's pretty much similar to that. Nothing crazy, right? Nothing crazy. It's similar to that. I just want to know a skeletal structure of what your paper is going to look like and what your topic is. Just a brief outline of the points you're going to cover. And if you change those points along the way, that's fine. That's okay. Nobody's stopping you. So that's basically it there as far as that goes. But yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. If you did the outline correctly for the first 2 papers, you'll be fine. So if you have questions, I would encourage you to ask me this week about them. I will go ahead and note for spring break, I'm not going to make a video next weekend for spring break. I'm not going to do that. So I want to go ahead and note that next week you don't have any assignments. Module 9, it's spring break. You have the week off. Our spring break is scheduled for March 7th through the 12th, or the 13th, technically that Sunday. So you won't have any assignments during that time with Module 9. Now, with that being said, I do want to note, I will be out of town that entire week. I will be away from my computer. I will probably not be checking my email from March 6th through the 12th. So if that is the case, try to email me this week if you have questions about your paper. Email me this week and let me know. But otherwise, you'll have to wait until Module 10. I will make a video for Module 10 that'll be out that weekend of the 12th and 13th that you guys will have access to. Okay? And you'll notice that Module 10 is already open. So if you want to go ahead and work on the assignment for Module 10, you can over spring break if you want to, but you don't have to, right? So yeah, and you've got a couple weeks to work on this paper. You technically have till the end of the month to work on paper 3. So you've got plenty of time to work on it. I know we get that week off, so I want to give you all plenty of time to get the paper constructed. But with that being said, I'm curious to know if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, that's it for Module 8 for this week. And then next week is spring break, so we won't have any assignments. Exciting times. So with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care. And yeah, I'm excited to read paper 2. I will hopefully have those back to you before we go on spring break. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week and let me know if you have any questions. Bye.